say that Richard's crazy, but to prove it, let me show you something. He's trailblazing.
Elliott, the real desert dog.
Good morning, Death Valley. It's me, Marty, desert dog biologist. We are here at Stovepipe Wells Campground. It's a beautiful morning. As you can see, we got the ravens already invading the campground, taking all little bits and pieces of food that we left from last night and this morning from breakfast.
Our little day trip to Chloride City left us wondering what was next on the docket. Luckily, our good friend Richard Elliott is one of those few men forged in the heat of Death Valley.
I was 9 years old. I think it was around 1958. And my father and uncle brought my brother and I here, and we camped at Ballarat on the far west side of the park. And we drove through Death Valley, and I thought, wow, what a place, is so huge.
Richard, being the trailblazer that he is, was happy to give us the grand tour of Death Valley. And today, he was going to show us some of its more popular sights.
I often showed people, I had 3 different styles in the lecture. One for those who just want to do the tourism with their cars and see the museums and eat at restaurants. So I tell them about Burton Wagon's Point plaque there at Stovepipe Wells and see Furnace Creek. For those who want to backpack and stuff, I try to turn them on to Panamint City, hike up to Panamint City, hike up to Saddle Rock Mine, go visit Skidoo. Maybe if you got a 4-wheel drive, do some 4-wheel drive. There's over 200 and some miles of 4-wheel drive roads through the park. So those people see Death Valley. You're a tourist to go through on the road and you just see a few historical spots. And even though we look like we're seeing a lot, all these little nooks and crannies are filled with things like wild burros, ghost towns, Indian trails. It's awesome.
This episode, in essence, is the driving tour. Since we were camping there, our first history lesson is on Stovepipe Wells.
I would help them out by shooting it away, but it's too good footage.
I'm here with my good friend Richard Elliott. He's our desert dog historian. And right now we are in Stovepipe Wells.
Stovepipe Wells, established in 1926 when Bob Eichbaum built a toll road from Darwin, California to here. And he started a new phase in Death Valley history, shifting from mining history to tourism. So as Bob Eichbaum just started tourism, and he established here Stovepipe Wells, which was called Bungalow City at that time. We had a bunch of little bungalows, much like the hotels that are here today. And he started the tourism in Death Valley with this toll road. And then in 1933, it became a national monument.
I'm an idiot. I thought you were saying ice bomb.
Ice bomb. I just say it's German.
Next, we drove down to the Harmony Borax Works and learned about one of the famous products to come out of Death Valley: borax. Richard, can you tell us a little bit about the Harmony Borax Works?
Harmony Borax Works, those of you who are familiar with the ever-famous product, the 20 Mule Team Borax soap and all that, Boraxo, all came from here in 1883 to 1888. The borax wagons down there were 5 sets. They carried the processed ore from here, the borax, 2 weeks down to Mojave, and 2 weeks back with empty wagons, and refill up. This is where your borax came from, right here. And it was called Coleman City. You'll see some ruins up that way. The Chinese processed a lot of the borax out on the cotton ball flat out there.
Once we visited the Harmony Borax Works here in Death Valley, we noticed this natural gravel deposit, and we decided to climb to the top of it because Richard told us about a dump site where the old people of the community at Harmony Borax would dump their garbage. That location is right over there to behind me, towards my right. So behind me, we have the town of Furnace Creek, which is private property. And as what I noticed when I was looking out into this area right here, Furnace Creek, I do know, has a golf course, and they built that golf course to obviously, you know, provide some recreational activities for a lot of tourists that come here. But there's been a lot of controversy around that because there used to be a pretty diverse community of native vegetation, plant life, and also animals that come around here. And since they built that golf course, you allocate water resources to upkeeping that golf course. And because of that, a lot of the native vegetation would die off. And if you look out here, all this surrounding vegetation, which is surrounding the golf course, that's all introduced tamarisk plant. And tamarisk is really bad because it actually soaks up a lot of the salt from the earth and stores it and accumulates it in its leaves. And that is supposed to be a natural defense against any other plant that would be growing in its area, because it'll drop those leaves, essentially salting the earth, not allowing anything else to grow around it. So that's what it's doing here too. And it's highly invasive, and it basically pushes out and outcompetes a lot of native vegetation for water resources.
Our next stop was the home of one of the rarest organisms on the planet.
When you come to Death Valley and you think about the animal life that lives out here, you probably don't think about fish. Yes, that's right. A fish that's adapted to the desert. In particular, this fish called the desert pupfish in the genus Cyprinodon. Now, what's special about this fish is its link to Death Valley's aquatic history thousands and thousands of years ago, back when Death Valley was covered completely by water in a part of the Colorado River aquifer. Now, the Salt Creek pupfish here is actually the last remaining vertebrate from what used to be Lake Manly here in Death Valley. Lake Manly was a huge lake that spanned 80 miles long and about 22 miles wide. And once conditions got too dry, it completely evaporated away. And all that remains of Lake Manly is Salt Creek here and Amargarosa Creek. So as Lake Manly was drying up, the pupfish adapted to the ever-changing conditions of increasing salinity and increasing temperatures, to the point where nowadays, when there was a study done in 1981, they saw how temperature and salinity affected the osmoregulation and metabolism of the pupfish, and they found that they actually breathe better and metabolize better in warmer and more saline conditions. The more freshwater it is and the more colder it is, the worse conditions for that fish are. And they've done it so well that they can survive in waters up to a temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit and a salinity that's over 3 times as much as the ocean. That's amazing. And it's a fish that lives in the desert. The Salt Creek pupfish isn't the only pupfish that lives in the deserts of the United States. The ancestral species of all the pupfish, once water started receding after the last ice age, had little pockets of isolated areas where those populations eventually became their own separate subspecies. And a lot of those subspecies are incredibly endangered and must be protected in order to preserve what biological secrets they have in which we can learn from them. Now, with Death Valley being a desert at all, the average person might not think that you'd see water out here. But yet here we are in a spot where we have actual running water through one of the most hottest places on the planet. Now, this water isn't fresh water. It's not water that you can actually drink, like if you're out here trying to survive or anything. It's actually very saline or salty, quite salty to the taste. Yeah, not as salty as ocean water, but still very salty, like almost ocean water type stuff. So that was kind of, when I saw that swimming there, I was like, okay, sure, Crix, it's
a little bit salty.
Yeah, obvious. But now back where I'm from, I specialize in aquatic insects, particularly in freshwater streams. So coming here and knowing that there's a lot of salt water flowing in this stream, I wasn't expecting to see that many insects, but I was pleasantly surprised. If you come over here, we have this aggregation of caddisflies. Now, caddisflies are these little insects that have larvae that live in water, and they take little bits and pieces of their surroundings, so pebbles and little leaves and twigs and stuff, and they make a little case for them for protection and camouflage. Now out here, we obviously have evidence of a species of caddisfly that is adapted to super saline environments. That's something that I haven't seen before personally, and it's very exciting actually having witnessed it here in Death Valley. Now what's another interesting observation that I'm seeing is how they're aggregating in these pools of low turbulence. Why they do that, I have no idea, but we also see that you have little bits and pieces of them, or not, well actually whole caddisflies kind of moving down the stream, getting carried down there. So they probably use their case as some type of buoyancy mechanism to get them down the stream. Or this is probably might be part of their life history. Maybe the adults fly up to the top of the water, or top of the headwaters, lay their eggs, they hatch, and then they drift downstream, pupate down to the bottom, turn into adults, and the cycle starts all over. That's just a proposal of a mechanism. I'm not sure if that's how it works. Just a guess. I mean, science always starts out with guesses. Just got to test them. Another interesting thing here at Salt Creek is the presence of this particular plant right here. This is commonly known as iodine bush. It's a type of pickleweed, and pickleweeds are plants that are particularly found around salt marsh environments, almost exclusively near the ocean. Now that's not the case here. We are hundreds of miles inland away from any ocean, but we do have conditions where those ocean types of environments are somewhat replicated because of all the salt that's accumulated here in this region. And because of that, we have a type of plant which actually is evolved to accumulate salt, and that's what that does, or that's what this iodine bush does. And they are edible, just not in big amounts because you know, it's salty.
And I try it.
It's got plenty of liquid in it. You could, if you could eat a bunch of it, you might survive enough to get somewhere else.
Right.
It's a weird taste. I don't know if it doesn't really taste like a pickle though. It tastes like
wetland plant. You know, like, well, I mean, we're in a wetland.
Yeah.
tastes like some sort of vegetable though.
Desert.
It is, but. Next, Richard took us to another famous landmark.
The Devil's Golf Course.
This is the Devil's Golf Course. Comprised almost entirely of salt deposited by ancient lakes. And these are actually pretty hard, like rock. And salty, of course. And the reason why they call it the Devil's Golf Course is there's been a few times where people have seen the devil actually just playing golf out here. This is where he prefers to play golf.
You can easily find them in the city, flying around your lights in your home. Their larvae and the lacewings themselves prey upon aphids and other plant pests that also might be insects. When they lay their eggs on these little stalks, and we're not quite sure why they lay them on stalks. It might be some type of predation avoidance, but if you see how they're laid, like, it doesn't really, any predator who would want to eat the eggs can eat them. But that's what they do. They lay their eggs and they're on top of little stalks, and then they hatch out, and then their larvae, which kind of looks somewhat similar to antlions, and they just live in plants and stuff like that. They bite too. It hurts a little bit, but
Not much.
yeah, no. It's like you laugh at it like you're trying.
And finally, no tourist can go to Death Valley without visiting the lowest point in North America.
We're here in this wonderful winter wonderland in Death Valley. And no, this is not snow, it's salt. Earlier we were back at the Devil's Golf Course and we were looking at all the strange or crazy rock formations that happened over there. And today, because we have this pretty special and rare event of it actually raining in Death Valley,
you get to actually see the process in which those formations can form and why there's so much salt out here. So much salt that it actually looks like snow.
People were asking why it's called Badwater, and I think it's because, I guess it's because the water's bad. So a surveyor came out and was mapping the area, and he wanted to give his mule some water. Took the mule to the pool. The mule wouldn't drink, and he called it Badwater, and the name just stuck.
Back when Death Valley was Lake Manly about 11,700 years ago, it left behind a couple of remnant animal species from those days. And those animal species have evolved to deal with the high salinity that was the end result of the evaporation of Lake Manly. One of those we talked about earlier, that was the pupfish, the last remaining vertebrate. And now we have one of the very few remaining invertebrates. Actually one of the most rare invertebrates in the world. And doubly rare because it's a snail, a mollusk. Mollusks need water. And to have a desert mollusk, a desert snail survive out here, well, that's something special. The name of the snail is the Badwater snail, and it can be only found in the Badwater basin. It is a highly endangered species of snail that has evolved to live in the super saline conditions that can be found here. So what happens is, when it rains and the rainwater comes moving through the landscape, it basically accumulates all those salts into the basin, the lowest point at which the water just stops. And because of Death Valley's high evaporation rate, all the water gets sucked away into the atmosphere and all the salt remains. And that's why it's so salty here. So salty that it looks like snow.
Okay, we're at Badwater, and here at the parking lot and the area where you have the wooden pathway, we're at 279 feet below sea level, the lowest point on the western hemisphere. And if you're a goofball like me, who likes to really be at the truly lowest point at minus 282 feet below sea level, then you walk 3.3 miles out that way, and you come to the lowest point, 282 feet below sea level. But you're not quite sure if you're there because there's no plaques or signs out there to say you have arrived at the true 282 feet below sea level. So you have to kind of know the coordinates and take a compass with you. It's almost directly due west, 5 degrees south of due west.
Alternatively, you could also just get a shovel and dig 2 feet, 2 or 3 feet, and you'll technically be in the lowest part.
I don't know anything about it.
Let's take the bet.
Wow. Let me get some footage first. It's got its eyes closed.
Is it dead or is it sleeping?
I think it's sleeping. Yo, it's definitely sleeping. It's breathing.